Marriage demolition. Original story.
I 32M just discovered my wife 30F cheating in our marital bed a few hours ago. Right now, I'm holed up in my dad's fishing cabin trying to wrap my head around what I do from here. I feel destroyed and worthless. I feel anger due to that rage. My entire life just got flushed down the toilet and I have absolutely nobody to talk to. The one person I thought I could talk to just betrayed me and tried to lie about all of it. I just scared the hell out of 3 people. One of which was me. If the cops aren't looking for me right now, I'm lucky. If they are, I'll deal with that when I'm forced to. I work in construction. Demolition to be specific. The crew I work with travels often. And I had been gone 10 days out of the 14 I was supposed to be gone. Due to rain very difficult to blow up wet things and the forecast, I decided to catch a plane back home until I was certain we could work again. The flight I took didn't get in until midnight. I wanted to surprise my wife. So I didn't let her know I was coming. I drove the 45 minutes from the airport to our house. 8 years ago, my wife found some beautiful acreage far from any other homes through her job in real estate. 2 years later I was finished building our house, which we have loved ever since. We have a 4-car garage. So any cars parked in front is unusual. A black SUV I didn't recognize made my heart sink. I instantly knew. I hadn't sensed any troubles with our marriage. We hadn't had any fights. Our sex life was great and frequent. But I knew somehow right then and there what I'd find once I went in. If the car had belonged to a relative of hers who was visiting, she would have let me know. Part of me hoped it belonged to a female coworker who had a little too much wine during a visit and needed to sleep it off. But that would have been highly out of the ordinary. I sat outside the house for at least 15 minutes thinking things through. But I parked my car about 6 inches from the driver's side of the SUV, which was parked beside a retaining wall. Whomever it belonged to wouldn't be entering their car to leave without my say or breaking out a front or back window. I cut off my car and entered through the back door via the deck. I have a concealed carry weapon permit for a gun. I had put on my holster before getting into my car at the airport and driving home. I wasn't afraid for my life. But I was afraid of losing my temper and taking the life of someone else. Walking into my house, everything was quiet. At first, I didn't think anyone was home. But with a finished meal for 2 on the table and a sink full of dishes, I knew something was up. I calmly walked down the hall to our bedroom and slowly turned the knob. I pushed the door open but didn't hear any commotion or movement at all. The room was pitch black dark. I walked over and turned the light on in the bathroom. When I turned around, there was my wife completely naked laying on top of some naked guy I'd never seen in my life. I was crushed. It felt like someone had just laid a 100-pound boulder on my chest. I felt tears well up in my eyes. But I knew tears were pointless and would do nothing to help the situation. I pulled out my phone and began recording. I walked around the bed videoing the pile of flesh in front of me. It began to sink in that my marriage was over. I realized all of our property would be divided evenly even though I have been 100% faithful. I suddenly realized the house I built with my own bare hands would have to be sold when we divided assets in the divorce. Being physically betrayed felt worse than any pain I could have imagined. Knowing I was getting ready to be financially gutted too nearly made me lose my shit because it seemed so unfair. But I knew damn well I was done with her and would never touch her defiled body again. I was disgusted by what I saw. But mostly at my wife. In my mind she had gone from sweet, devoted wife to alley crack whore in the span of 15 minutes. Neither moved at all. I was fairly certain they were both passed out drunk. Since the house was going to need to be sold, I suddenly didn't care about any damage to the house I'd worked so hard on. I pulled out my .45 and just looked at both of them betraying me in my own bed. For a second or two I contemplated shooting her, knowing those bullets would pass right through and kill him as well. But I came to my senses and realized neither were worth getting the electric chair over. And despite the hurt I was feeling, I knew I might want to keep on living after all was said and done. So, I pulled back the hammer of my gun, lifted the gun into the air aiming to my upper right and fired off 2 rounds into the ceiling. They both woke instantly. She was trying to push off of him to turn around. He shoved her off of him and into the floor when he suddenly locked eyes with me. Fear doesn't adequately describe the look in his eyes. But compared to the sheer terror in my wife's eyes, he looked rather calm. She tried to tell me it wasn't what it looked like. So, I fired a round through the bedroom closet door. She shut the fuck up really quickly while he still hadn't said a word. They were each seated on opposite sides of our bed with the sheet pulled up to their necks. I asked the guy who he was, and he said his name was Marcus. I asked my wife how they knew each other, and she explained he owned his own real estate company. Then I asked how long the cheating had been going on. Because I had been totally clueless my wife was cheating. She had the audacity to claim that was the first and only time they had slept together. So, I fired 2 rounds into the bed's headboard between them. They both began crying and begging me to stop. So I asked the question again. To my surprise, Marcus answered 6 months. It pissed me off, but at least I knew the truth. I asked my wife when she stopped loving me, and through tears she lied and said she never stopped. I fired 2 rounds into the bathroom on her side of the bed, and she began screaming as glass from the mirror shattered all over the counter and floor. I told her she was a lying, worthless whore. And I was done with her lies. She was clearly having a panic attack. With good reason. But at the moment I didn't care. I asked the guy if he was married. He replied that he was. I asked if he had children that would miss him. He swallowed before admitting he had 2 children. I told him I truly appreciated him showing me that my wife is a tramp before we 2 had children together. But I asked him if having sex with a cheating slut was worth losing his wife and kids over. He begged me not to tell his wife. I told him to shut up because at that moment she had about a 50% chance of her ending up a widow. For the next 15 minutes I paced at the foot of the bed with gun drawn, just trying to think. I knew holding them there against their will could be deemed me taking hostages. I knew I would have to eventually let them go. I told my wife to get up and go get her car keys. She got out of bed and began to reach down and get her clothes off of the floor to put back on. I told her to stop. Clothes weren't needed. And again to get the keys. She walked down the hall and brought back her keys, handing them to me still crying. I removed the house key and told her she wouldn't be needing it anymore. I know she wanted to protest I couldn't do that and that legally she was right. But 45 tends to make debating legality moot. I then told Marcus to stand, get his keys and wallet out of his pants, and to follow me. I led him outside toward his car, where I punched him in the face repeatedly until his nose and mouth were bleeding. After I moved my car so he could get into his SUV, I went back, picked up his keys, told Marcus to stand up. I explained he could go home right then and there to confess everything to his wife, or she'd hear from me within 48 hours with all the evidence of his cheating I had recorded. I also explained he had 45 seconds to get off of my property, or a coroner would be escorting him off of the property. The fact he had no clothes on seemed a secondary issue at the moment. He got in his car and peeled away before I counted to 25. I went back inside where my wife had put on a robe and was seated at the kitchen table. I went to the bedroom, picked up her cell phone and brought it to her in the kitchen. I asked if she wanted to call her parents, or her sister, to pick her up. She refused. I even asked if she'd like to call the police. I think she anticipated us discussing things to clear the air, so she said no. She began to try and explain, but I stopped her yapping and told her we were done forever as far as I was concerned. I explained our home was no longer her home and she needed to get in her car and drive anywhere that wasn't our house. I explained I no longer felt any love for her at all after what she'd done, and there would be no second chances. She began to apologize, cry, and plead. 2 rounds fired into the double oven and 1 into the fridge brought blessed silence. Having your nearest neighbor over 2 miles away has its benefits. I explained to her at that moment I did not care if I lived or died, and that she had totally destroyed me with her behavior. I also explained that all love I ever had for her turned to hate the minute I saw she and Marcus naked together. If I could have Thanos snapped her from existence and my memory at that moment, I would have. I told her I was barely maintaining my composure with the feelings I had of loathing her. I said it would be best if she went to the garage, got in her car, and drove away forever. Through tears she went out in the garage, got in her car, and left. That was about 5 hours ago. Realizing I may have committed a crime or 2 with my reaction, I didn't want to deal with any cops that happened to show up. I turned off everything and locked the doors before going out and getting into my car again. My dad owns a fishing cabin he and his buddies use fairly often. I drove here and used the hidden spare key to let myself in. It was far too early to call anyone when I got here. I decided I needed a drink, and I'm about a quarter way through a bottle of my father's Balvenie scotch. Dad is going to be pissed about that until I tell him what my wife did. Plus, I'm pretty certain it's the bottle I bought for his birthday last month. I really don't know what to do. I've read through posts here and other subs on Reddit looking for answers. But most seem to be people trying to figure out if their spouse is cheating. I already know the truth. Well, I know as much of the truth as I want to know. The reasons for infidelity all ring hollow. Other posts seem to be some strategies to get a cheater back. Why anyone would want to get back a cheating spouse is beyond me. But I want a divorce. I want it in my favor and as fast as I can get it. She doesn't have the option to pick me ever again. I'm a human, not a carnival prize. I want to remove her from my life and burn any reminder of her in my life. I don't want to ever see or hear from her again. Can everything be taken care of by lawyers? I have money to get things started. What I don't have is the time, energy, and patience to be dealing with this bullshit. 8 fucking years of marriage down the drain. 8 years that I now consider one huge lie because after what I just saw, how can I accept anything she has ever said to me as truth? 8 years of my life wasted on an evil bitch fraud. Part of me is wishing I had shot them both and just taken my own life. But that may be the Scotch talking. Jesus. I have to get my shit tested just to make sure that whore didn't give me anything. Actually, I've pissed away a decade on her now that I think about it. Her actions have invalidated my life and negated any value to my time with her. The only thing I will be taking from this marriage is that honesty and loyalty are things from the past. The only thing forever about any relationships anymore is herpes. That shit is forever. Love and marriage are all fucking lies. Really down right now. Some I'm sure are already viewing me like some knuckle-dragging Neanderthal for responding with violence and threats. I also know some will give me grief for the use of one of my guns. I didn't shoot anybody. And the bedsheets were already soiled before I fired a shot. If bullet holes reduce the price the house can be sold by a few thousand, I can live with that. I just can't deal with this shit. Part of me wants to just eat a damn bullet and give up. The life I had is over and it isn't coming back even if I wanted to. People are going to say I dodged a bullet, irony not having kids with my wife and finding out she's disloyal. It doesn't feel that way right now. I go from crying uncontrollably to rage like I've never known. Either I face this or just end it all. And right now, the second choice seems like the better option. Maybe if I pass out and get a little sleep, things won't seem as bad. But I doubt it. The weather forecast looks like things will be clearing up enough to work in a few days, so I will need to be on a plane the day before. I don't like the region we are working for various reasons. But part of me just wants to stay there when the job is done and not come back. Part of me wants to figure out where I want to start over if I want to even deal with starting over. How do I decide what lawyer to get? Is there a rating system online for legal assistance on Yelp or some other site? I hate damn lawyers. Members of the scummiest legal profession. Now I have to find the most hardball lawyer I can find. Sorry for the wall of text. It wasn't as cathartic as I hoped. But nothing is going to remove this heartache anytime soon. What the hell am I supposed to do? What is the point of doing anything? The person I was focused giving my all for is gone forever. And tonight I learned never existed. I wasn't perfect by any means. But I was faithful. I was never abusive. She'd never heard me really yell until tonight. I was a good husband. I liked being married and faithful. But for every good guy out there, some slut is just waiting to get her claws into him so she can ruin his life for her gain. Fuck this life. Fuck my soon-to-be ex-wife and fuck relationships. I'm just rambling now. Guess I'll go to bed. When I wake up, I guess I will call my parents and fill them in on what went down. I'm just in shock and I've never had heartache like this in my life before. Maybe tomorrow I'll feel better. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy my video, please subscribe and leave like.